Good evening, dear participants. Welcome back to lecture number 4 of this 15-day lecture series on history of English literature. Today, as you can see, we have Dr. Anitha with us, who is presently Assistant Professor of English and has been working in Nirmala College for Women, Coimbatore in Tamil Nadu for the last 16 years. She has over 10 years of experience in teaching postgraduate students and undergraduate students for the last 16 years. She is specialized in American literature and Indian writing in English and history of English literature, of course, and has served as chief editor of the college magazine. She has compiled and published an in-house book titled Literature for Competency for the postgraduate level students and general English book for undergraduate level. She has served as chief guest and resource persons from various institutions in their various programs, webinars, seminars, to name a few, and has published scholarly journals in various reputed journals of national and international repute. To widen her knowledge in diverse streams, she has presented papers in of course, national and international seminars and conferences. Her pursuits in research still persists because she's guiding MPhil and PhD research scholars. Her exploration into literature has enabled her to organize symposiums, seminars, and literary competitions. On behalf of Team DAATH VOYAGE, ma'am, we are absolutely thrilled and honored to welcome you. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation and putting in the zealous effort that we can see I can personally witness over the last couple of weeks. It's an honor to be associated with experienced, knowledgeable, and dedicated, hardworking researcher come teacher like you. We welcome you wholeheartedly on this platform. Without wasting much time, ma'am, the platform is all yours.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for that beautiful introduction. I'm very happy and honored to be the part of DAATH VOYAGE. We're very proudly to say that they have come to the 10th set of a series, online lecture series. So we are on day 4 on the lecture series, online lecture series on history of English literature. And today's topic we are going to explore, and we're going to travel through the 17th century, examining the Jacobian, Caroline, and Puritan periods. So, England had a very strong tradition of literature in the English vernacular. To make it effective, English literature English Renaissance has taken place in the latter half of the 15th century. Then we also see in the early 16th century to the 17th century, making it very effective with the cultural and the artistic movement in England. So the effect of a Renaissance on English literature is so obvious that we see an increased emphasis on humanism and individuality, as well as on the increasing willingness of the writers to satirize existing institutions, or they started to speak on the contemporary issues, especially on the church and the state. But what did they on the church as well as on the state? So what did they give much importance was on was on their perspectives, their own perspectives, rather than the religious outlooks. And the 17th century marked by a very long struggle between the king and the parliament, which came to its climax in the execution of Charles I in the year 1649. So the struggle was partially political and it was religious also. Moreover, the country suffered the disturbances and the destructions of a civil war. We also find how England was sharply divided class by class. Generally speaking, aristocracy and their dependents were cavaliers, and the commercial and the trading classes supported parliament. So or the parliament. And then we have, let us now have a look at the periods like yeah. the Jacobian to the Restoration, period. So here, this is a multicolored period of the history of English literature. So the 16th century was, as we know that the 16th century was a splendid age. It was called as a golden age. It was the time of, that is Elizabethan period, where it was a time of peace and prosperity, and progression was seen in almost all the areas. So Jacobian era succeeded Elizabethan era, and later it was preceded by the Caroline era. Specifically during the Jacobian era, it dedicated its literary perspectives on the wide areas of architecture, visual arts, decorative arts, and literatures, which was very predominant during the Jacobian era. So this is how the Jacobian era, this is how the 17th century literature has been divided. The Jacobian Age from 1603 to 1625, the Caroline Age from 1625 to 1649, and the Commonwealth Period from 1649 to 1660. So the Jacobian Age is otherwise called as the Age of James. It is otherwise, it is the continuation of the Elizabethan Age. Now, Caroline Age is otherwise called as the Age of Charles I. So during this period, the Renaissance spirit was almost in the decline stage. And the Commonwealth period, this period is remarkable for the rise of the Puritanism, and especially Oliver Cromwell, who has taken up, who started to rule over England during this period. This period is otherwise called as the age of John Milton also, who was considered as the greatest poet of this era. So, and next, let us have an overview of the royal dynasty. So it is very important to have an overview of the royal dynasty, which are highlighting on the stage power of the two dynasties, namely the Tudor dynasty as well as the Stewart dynasty. So the Tudor and the Stewart periods, they mark the beginning of the modern England, where the period spans nearly for 200 years. And the period was named after the surnames of the monarchs who reigned. For example, the Tudor family originally came from Welsh, and the Stuarts from Scotland. Now, the Tudor period extended from 1485 to 1603. That is the House of the Tudor, which was controlled, House of the Tudor controlled the English throne. Now, coming to the Stewart period of British history lasted from 1603 to 1714. During this time, the power was on the House of Stewart. So when that is during the Stewart period, what we see was there was a flourishing court, like that is the literature was at its sound, but at the same time, that is they underwent the upheavals and the instability because of a plague, fire, and war. And one more thing we have to keep in mind, it was also an age of intense religious problems, and also radical politics was also at its peak during this time. So after this, we will have a glimpse on the House of the Tudor. So before us understanding about the House of the Stewart or the Stewart dynasty, because the 17th century begins with the Stewart dynasty. Now, before understanding that, let us have a glimpse on the House of Tudor. So the House of Tudor was originally a royal belonged to the Welsh origin, and they descended from the Tudors of Pennant. They were noble and aristocratic family connected with the village of Pennant in Anglesey, North Wales, and they ruled England from 1485 to 1603. So the house of Tudor was a royal house, as we know. So the Tudors succeeded the house of the Plantagenet as the rulers of the Kingdom of England, and the Tudors in turn was succeeded by the house of Stuarts. And how did this Tudor dynasty comes to an end is when the last Tudor queen, Elizabeth, when she did not have a heir to the crown, had heir to the throne, the monarch of the ruling monarch has come to an end, or otherwise the Tudor dynasty eventually came to an end in the 17th century. So the Tudor dynasty comes to an end here. Now, before going, let us have a look at the principal members of the House of Tudor. It is very important to know about these five, but I'll be concentrating only on three people. So royal dynasty of a Welsh origin gave five significant monarchs to England. We have Henry VII, Henry VIII, Edward VI, Mary I, and Elizabeth I. So this is the periods of which they reigned also. Most importantly, to speak about Henry VII, he was the first monarch of England, who was also called as Henry Tudor, who succeeded the throne by ending the Wars of Roses between the House of the Lancaster and the House of York. And next is Henry VIII, as a very important king who played the role during the 16th, who played a very important role, who was an enlightened ruler of England, who was known for but at the same time, finally, he was only known for his, he was ruthlessness, bloodthirsty king. He turned out to be obstinate and self-indulgent. So I'm not going into details of it because yesterday we saw about the Elizabethan age. And of course, Elizabeth I was a queen of England, often called as the Elizabethan age, when England itself, there's the age of prosperity, the power in politics and commerce and arts was at its high, was at its peak. And let us have a quick look at the Tudor monarchs. Here we have to the first photograph of Henry VII, Henry VIII, Edward, Mary, as well as Queen Elizabeth. So the end of the Tudor dynasty comes to an end, which gives rise to the Steward the Steward period, which lasts from 1603 to 1714. That makes the 17th century, and contemporarily the writers of that century also contributes much to the 17th century. So we will see in detail the 17th century age as well as its literature. So, and next is a glimpse on the House of the Steward. Now, the House of the Steward is the royal house of Scotland, England, and Ireland, and later Great Britain. So this family name comes from the office, which is called as a High Steward of Scotland. And it refers to an officer who controls the domestic affairs of a royal household. And in the 12th century, there was a king whose name is David I of Scotland, who gives the title to Walpole, a nobleman from Brittany, and thereafter they take up the surname as Steward. So this is how we get the name Steward, Royal House of Scotland, England, and Ireland. So the first monarch was Robert II. The male line descendants were kings and queens in Scotland from 1371 and of England and Great Britain from 1603 until 1714. And Mary, Queen of Scots, brought up in France, where she adopted the French spelling of the name Stewart. So that is how we get the name Stewart dynasty. And now who plays the major role and who becomes the first king of England from the Stuart dynasty? It is none but James I, who reigned from 1603 to 1625. So this is James I. Now, when Queen Elizabeth I died with no direct heir, King James VI of Scotland ascended as the new monarch to the English throne as James I of England. So James VI of Scotland already had a great experience of ruling the country, but when he becomes the monarch of England, he was called as James I of England. So the ascension of James I to the throne conjoined the two long warring nations of England as well as Scotland. So now who's James I? Now James I or James VI of Scotland. Now James VI of Scotland is also called as James I of England. So James VI of Scotland is the son of Mary Queen of Scots. Now Mary Queen of Scots is a cousin of Elizabeth. So way back when we in the year 1503, when James IV of Scotland married Margaret Tudor, she becomes the queen consort of Scotland. Now, who is Margaret Tudor? Is the eldest daughter of James VII. James VII is the first Tudor monarch. James VII is the first Tudor monarch. So when Margaret marries James IV of Scotland, the royal houses of England and Scotland are linked. Much better, or that is better to say that after a century later, it resulted in the union of the crowns. That is, James VI becomes James I of Scotland. Now the era begins here. That is, the 17th century begins here. The Steward era begins. The Stewards were monarchs of England and Ireland and its growing empire until the death of Queen Anne in 1714, except for the period of Commonwealth between 1649 to 1660. Now, this Steward period witnesses an intense religious and political conflicts which shifted the power from the monarchy to parliament. This is very important to understand. It shifts the power from the monarchy to the parliament, which we will understand as we continue. So, meanwhile, discoveries and innovations were also reflected in this period. And then we have, so Jacobian too, the concepts of monarchy. So although James was a successful monarch in Scotland, the same was not true in England, because he was not able to deal with the hostile parliament because his management of the kingdom funds and being an extreme Protestant only created enemies for him. So James I, moreover, believed in absolute power of monarchy and had a rocky relationship with the powerful Protestants. And so he considered himself to rule by the divine rights of kings, which means a political doctrine in defense of monarchical absolutism. So which asserted that the kings derived their authority, where the kings got their power from God, and they are not accountable to anybody on earth, especially the parliament. So by governing for much of the time without the parliament and relying just on some favorite people of James I, it resulted only in the dilution of the legacy of the strong representative government which was established by Elizabeth I. So this resulted ultimately in political issues as well as religious problems. So the political issues is the conflict with the parliament, which becomes evident when James I had James I had the threats of plots against him. And the religious problems is the conflict between the Puritans as well as the Catholics. So when James came to the throne, he practiced moderate Protestant religious policies. But at the same time, the Catholics and the Protestants were not happy, that is, as they were not able to practice deep religious faiths. And so many extreme Puritans, they left England for Holland as well as to America, where Protestantism was accepted. So, and moreover, but at the same time, he helped the people in Scotland as well as in England to study about the science, literature, and art. So he himself has written, most importantly, established an ideology based on monarchy, for monarchy. So James wrote Demology in 1597, The True Law of a Free Monarchies in 1598, Baskin Doran in 1599, and a Counterblast Tobacco in 1604. And the most important work is sponsoring to the authorized King James Version of the Bible in the year 1604, of which we will see in detail later. So now, so because James I had the problems, had the conflicts and the problems with the politics as well as with the religion, the Catholics were not happy with James, and they had major plots against James. So the first one is called as the byplot or treason of the priests in the year 1603. Secondly, main plot or the treason of Maine in 1603, and Gunpowder Plot in 1603 to 1606. So byplot or the treason of the priests, it is a conspiracy that was led by the Roman Catholic priests and the Puritans, aiming at a tolerance for further separated denominations. And so they want to kidnap the new English King James I of England. Now, this byplot is only considered as a minor component which led to a larger component, and that is the main plot in the year 1603. So what is the main plot? Is removing of the King James I and replacing him with his cousin Lady Arabella Steward. So this plot was led by Lord Cobham, who was funded by the Spanish government. And this ultimately but all these, the byplot and the main plot, did not work out. And the outcome of the byplot and the main plot turned where James, the enforcement of the acts of the parliament, he was very strict, and he curbed the practice he curbed the practices of the Catholicism in England. So next one is a very important plot, which is called as Gunpowder Plot. So gunpowder, it is often called as Gunpowder Treason Plot or the Jesuit treason. Now this once again is a failed assassination attempt against James I by a group of provincial English Catholics, which was led by Robert Gatsby. Now he is the leader of the group of English Catholics. He planned, but the gunpowder plot was a failure. So, so what was their aim was in order to replace the country's Protestant government with Christian leadership. So, so what did they do was that the plotters, they leased an undercroft or a storage room beneath the House of the Lords, and the person who was involved in it is Guy Fawkes, who was given the in charge of the gunpowder that was stockpiled. But the plot was eventually revealed by the revealed to the authorities by an anonymous letter. And in the evening of 4th November 1605, Fox was discovered, and they found that he was taking guard of nearly 36 barrels of gunpowder. So this was just enough in order to blow the House of the Lords, but ultimately they were the conspiracy was a failure, and 8 of them survived, and they were given they were punished, they were sentenced and convicted, and so on. So these are the 2 people who were involved in the gunpowder plot, but it was a failure. And next is the historical. Yeah, so the next one is the historical, can't see the screen fully. Of the Jacobian age. So we'll have a glance at the Jacobian age. So James I of England and VI of Scotland ascended the throne of England after the death of Queen Elizabeth in 1603. King James was a Protestant married to a Catholic queen. And we know the practice of the king, that is divine rights of the kings proclaimed in 1604. According to it, kings were the representative of God and thus accountable to him alone. And this period also saw the translation of the authorized version of the Bible. And a series of plots were plotted to unseat James I. And the most famous of these plots was the Gunpowder Plot. So this is the understanding of the history of the Jacobian age. Now, after this, we are moving to the Caroline age. As I told you in the beginning, we have got three periods: the Jacobian, the Caroline, as well as the Commonwealth. So this age is featured, the Caroline period. So here we have Charles I. After the death of James I in the year 1625, his son Charles I reigns for another 24 years till 1649. Now the term is derived from Carlos, the Latin for Charles, and the Caroline era followed the Jacobian era, the reign of Charles' father, James I, and overlapped with the English Civil War. Finally, it was followed by the English interregnum until the Restoration in 1660. So this age is featured with the characteristics of civil war, rise of Puritanism, lack of spirit of unity, dominance and intellectual spirit, and decline of drama. So Charles I, who was the king of the Great Britain, of Britain and Ireland from the year 1625 to 1649, that is frequently had quarrels with the parliament, ultimately provoked to the civil war, leading to his execution in the year 1649. So after his succession in 1625, so Charles I also believed in the divine rights of the kings, and he dominated the government by his own conscience. So many of us, similar, as how it was for the James I period, like that, many of his subjects and the politics were not happy, with the policies that was created by Charles I, and especially the levying of the taxes without the parliamentary consent, and not happy with the absolute monarchism also. And moreover, his religious policies coupled with his marriage to a Roman Catholic. So what happened was that there was a mistrust from the reformed religious groups, that is the English Puritans, who felt that his thoughts were more or less were more likely towards the Catholic, that is, where more of Catholic interests were there in it. So we also know that this is an age of civil wars, and there was a series of civil wars that is between the between the parliament, the Roundheads, and the Royalist Cavaliers. That is how it goes on. And finally, the outcome is of this age is a threefold. One is the execution of Charles I. Two is the exile of his son Charles II, and three is replacement of the English monarchy with the Commonwealth of England from 1653. From 1650. So there was a period, interregnum, and finally the restoration of monarchy takes place in the year 1660. And this is Charles I of England, the second king of the Steward dynasty of England, who believed in divine rights. His subjects opposed his political policies, religious policies raised because of his marriage to a Roman Catholic. Frequent quarrels with the parliament resulted in civil war and execution of him. And the next period is the Commonwealth period from 1649 to 1660. Now, this period, like the earlier two periods, belonged to the Puritan age. Now, this is a period when there was no monarch in in England. So after the death of Charles I, Oliver Cromwell becomes Cromwell, the Puritan leader, comes to power. And after his death in the year 1658, his son Richard Cromwell takes up the position till 1660. So in this period, Puritanism becomes naturally unpopular. The English people realized that monarchy was very important. And this period is also otherwise called as Commonwealth Interregnum. So interregnum is a period when there was when it was not ruled by monarchy. So the interregnum period in the history of England is from 1649 to 1660. That is the execution of Charles I and the arrival of his son in 1660. And there begins the Restoration period. So this is about Commonwealth period. So let us have the general features of the 17th century. So we have got three general divided as into three. So one is the political turmoil, turmoil and the emergence of a civil war, the growth of a Puritanism, and the 17th century literature, soberness, and decay of drama. So considering the political crisis which began when James I was reclaimed, the right of royalty from the Act of Parliament, which gave importance to the divine rights. And secondly, the Puritans, who became a powerful force in the social life of the age, initiated the movement for social and constitutional reforms. And then, of course, the emergence of a civil war because of the stronghold of the monarchy. And next is the growth of Puritanism. Now, King Charles I infringed the rights of commons as well as their constitutional privileges So the Puritans had a keen sense of the supremacy of that is of God as the ruler of the rulers, and moreover they were tolerant against any tyrannies, and so Puritanism became a political as well as a moral and religious force. So what did Puritanism exercise was that so though it had a great influence upon the tone and temper of the English life and thought, Puritanism became so powerful and it led to the austere and a pious life. But at the same time, they were hard and stern also, especially during the time of a Commonwealth. Even the simple and the harmless pleasures were forbidden, where we understand about the closing of the theaters. So that was the growth of Puritanism. And the 17th century literature, it's a soberness and a decay of drama. So so what we don't find is the spirit of gaiety, the youthful vigorness, the vitality of romances and chivalry, which especially distinguishes the age of Shakespeare, was absolutely absent in the 17th century. So the Elizabethan literature, which was so inspiring, that is and this age turned out to be an age of a sadness, but gloom and pessimism, even pessimism in their writings and so on. So this age age led to soberness and that is soberness even in their writings also. We can that is sadness, melancholy, all these are the facts that we find in the writings. So that is what that makes up the 17th century literature. And next is the Jacobian literature. So what is Jacobian literature? It's a body of work written during the reign of James I of England from 1603 to 1625. So the 17th century marked a shift from an age of faith to an age of reason. Literature literature represents the age, the turbulence of a society, religion, and monarchy of this period was much seen in the works. And of course, the life of the English people changed because of the religious controversies and the series of civil wars that naturally shook the nation. So these issues reformulated the role of individuals in the society and their perspectives of a faith and social structure of the England. Ultimately, all these things ultimately changed. So writers of this period, what did they do was they offered their own philosophies as a proof of the issues, as a proof of the contemporary issues of the contemporary issues. That is why frequently dark in mood, interrogative about the permanence of a social order. So there were always questions about the social order because they tried their best in order to reformulate the role of the individuals. So that is what I said in the beginning. So this was an age that tried to restructure their individuality. Restructure their individuality through the writings, not on the religious outlooks, but on their personal personal writings or their own perspectives, and so on. And so this is an age of great flowering of literature, and in other sense, it was an age of decadence. So that is despite. That is to elaborate on this flowering of literature. So despite the turbulence of monarchy, religion, and differences and the civil wars, etc., the 17th century was also an age of exploration. It was an expansion of science, we see, the reflection of individualism, then personal perspectives, and so on. So that is why we have, like, for example, Francis Bacon, who offered his own philosophy with the scientific reasoning, his observations and his experimentation, and based upon his experimentation is what that he has written his essays. And of course, in the advancement of science, we have Isaac Newton, the Copernicus, Galileo, and they were widely accepted also. And so such new ideas and such scientific discoveries changed the people's mind, and they tried to reformulate themselves, and they tried to understand the world as such. So moreover, education was also becoming very widely accepted, and so this widely accepted, and this helped them in order to create an individualistic society. But at the same time, and in other sense, it was an age of decadence. So one of the reasons for the decadence of the Jacobean drama was its loss of a national spirit. Because what was found in the Elizabethan age is the national spirit, as well as speaking about the queens, the nobles, the courtiers, and the groundlings, and so on. But this kind of unity of a spirit absolutely declines during the Jacobean literature. So the Jacobean period, yeah. So the Jacobean period we can otherwise call it as a continuation of Elizabethan period. Okay, so these are all the writers who has contributed to the Jacobean period. So they are, yeah. So how can we call it as a continuation of Elizabethan period? So as we know that Elizabethan age does not die with Elizabeth. Even after the death of Elizabeth, the trend was followed. The romantic spirit was there, and that continued also. So in other words, the Jacobean period is also called as a continuation of the Elizabethan, in the sense that Jacobean age was a flourishing flourishing, rich, because many writers who were born and nurtured during the Elizabethan time published their main works during the early part of the 17th century, like Shakespeare. Now, whose great tragedies was published during the first half. I mean, during the beginning of the 17th century. So when we make a when making a study, that is, we find that these writers have nurtured the Elizabethan age. So in fact, truly speaking, there were no much writers who were born, who were very born during the Jacobian, and they become very popular at that time. So therefore, the writers who are born after 1570 and 1575 were truly considered as Jacobian. So for instance, William Shakespeare, his greatest tragedies may date from the beginning of this period. And like John Webster, whose works are preoccupied with the problems of evil, also ultimately belongs to the Jacobian period. And the era's comedy, okay, the satire of Ben Jonson, Beaumont, and Fletcher also belongs to this period. And the Jacobian period also included the graceful verses of Ben Jonson and the Cavalier poets, and their intellectual complexities, especially of the metaphysical poetries of John Donne and Robert Burton, showed their flexibility and their style, which they created later. So the era's monumental prose achievement was the King's James version of the translation of the Bible. So these are the authors who contributed. And then we have the dramatists of the Jacobian age: Ben Jonson, Francis Beaumont, John Fletcher, John Webster, Philip Messenger, John Ford, James Shirley, and George Herbert. So now let us see about Ben Jonson from the year 1572 to 1637. So although we know that this period is a barren period when we speak about drama. Okay, so some of the post-Shakespearean dramatists kept the tradition of writing. So Ben Jonson, otherwise called as Benjamin Jonson, and he was popularly called as the Sons of Ben and Tribes of Ben. So Jonson was an English playwright. He was a poet who created a lasting influence upon the English poetry as well as the stage comedy. And most importantly, he was the writer who popularized the comedy of humors, and he was also known for his satirical plays, his lyrics, and epigrammatic writings. So that is how his plays are like we find vices and follies and shortcomings, and and all these things are associated in his works. Now he's called as the Sons of Ben. So followers of Ben Jonson in English poetry and drama in the first half of the 17th century followed Jonson's philosophy and his style of writing. And he's also called as a tribe of Ben. Most of the Cavalier poets, they admired him. They were influenced by Jonson's poetry, like Robert Herrick, Richard Lovelace, Suckling, and so on, Thomas Carew, and so on. So they were influenced and followed the style of Ben Jonson. And his successful plays are Every Man in His Humor, written in the year 1598, and it's a sequel, Every Man Out of His Humor, 1599, elaborated a theory of humor, and Cynthia Scribble's 1600, satirical comedies. Ben Jonson involved in the War of Theatres with playwrights like John Marston and Thomas Dekker. So speaking about about his plays, he has produced nearly 17 dramas and 15 comedies and two tragedies also. And so comedy of of humor. So it is a genre of the dramatic comedy which focuses on a character or on a that is a range of characters, each of whom exhibits their own traits with the humor, and that is with their humor, with their personality, with their desires, and with their conduct, and so on. So this technique is found in the Aristophanes, and the English playwright Ben Jonson, George Chapman popularized it at the end of the 16th century and in the beginning of the 17th century. Um, and Next is masks. Masks was something that was that became very popular. So that is inaugurated in Renaissance Italy, flourished in England during the reigns of Elizabeth I, James I, and Charles I. Now, this was employed by Shakespeare and it was perfected by Ben Jonson. These are the works of Ben Jonson connecting to masks. And so what is a mask? So it is an elaborate form of court entertainment that combined poetic drama, music, song, dance, splendid costuming, stage decorations, and plot was often slight and mainly mythological and allegorical. So the royalists or the aristocrats who were the members of the royal families turned out to be the audience of the masque. So sometimes, and this was mainly meant for the royal people. This was an entertainment, especially for the royal people. And we also find that the royalists themselves take the role of the characters with the mask, and then and then they also act it acted, and they also perform on the stages. And the greatest Ben Jonson is considered as the greatest mask dramatist. And James I, what we find is that James I, when it comes to mask, James I has widely connected to Inigo Jones, who helped him in producing who helped in the production in the production of the play, who helped him in that is the elaborate settings, the costumes, the stage the stage mechanisms, and so on. So every that is it was actually a very huge production, and literally the sport of the kings and the queens, the dramas, and the kings and the queens and the royal people, they used to be the audience for it. So that is and it is not only Ben Jonson, but before that even Sir Philip Sidney, as well as Samuel Daniel has written on Mars. So now, let us see what were the Elizabethan marks. So Elizabethan marks was it was lavish and dramatic. Often it was spoken in words, usually performed by masked disguised players representing either the mythological or the allegorical figures. And mask is shortly an allegorical dramatic entertainment, which which where they satirize, the satirize, and it is written for the royalists in order to have fun and entertainment. And this was employed by Shakespeare, and also it was used by Chapman, Marston, Nash, Beaumont, Middleton, and so on. So mask is considered as a subgenre of the drama, and various elements like costume, mask, that is a structure, the pattern, allegorical symbolism, mythological personages, and so was involved in it. And then the that is the and then next we find here as a how that is a war of theaters. So this is very interesting because it is a conflict which involves the Elizabethan playwrights, especially Ben Jonson, John Marston, and Thomas Dekker. Now, John Marston and Thomas Dekker, they presented a satirical portrait on Johnson in History Maastricht. In reply to it, Ben Jonson criticized Marston's style as fustian in Every Man Out of His Humor. So in turn, Marston satirized Johnson as Lampata Doria in the play What You Will. And Johnson wrote a poetaster, mocked both John Marston and Thomas Dekker in it. And again, in turn, Dekker attacked in Satire Maastricht and called Johnson as puny, pockmarked, conceit, pedant, murderer, and bricklayer. So finally, this conflict comes to an end, and we see that the three playwrights eventually they reconcile, and Johnson collaborates with Dekker, and he writes The King's Entertainment. And he also collaborates with Marston and Chapman and writes Eastward Ho. So these are the comedies of Ben Jonson, and the important ones are Walpony, Epicene or the Silent Woman, The Alchemist, and Bartholomew Fair. And his two important that is tragedies are Sejanus, His Fall, and Catiline. So this is about him. And so I'm not going to speak about all the plays, but only Walpony, which is first produced in the year 1605 to 1606. So this is a comedy play. It we find the elements of a city comedy and beast fables, and a merciless satire on greed and lust. It is considered as Johnson's most performed play and is among the finest Jacobian era comedies. So the synopsis of the play is we have Walpony, who's the fox, a Venetian gentleman, and who is almost at the deathbed, and and we have the characters like Walter, Corbaccio, and Corvino. Now these people want to inherit his fortune because he had he was a very rich person, and so on. And so these three people they bring luxurious gifts in order to attract him, but what happens is that his servant encourages all the three people and made them to believe that you're going to get the fortune, you're going to get the fortune, and you are going to get the fortune. So the themes that is persistent in Walpony is greed, parasitism, vengeance, deception, and which is visible all throughout the play, greedy characters, and which causes the downfall also. So this is about the play of Walpony. And next we have John Marston. He's an English playwright and pamphleter, and there is no much biological information about him. And his important plays are Old Fortunates and The Shoemaker Holiday. And he's also a satirist who lived in the latter half of the Elizabethan and the early Jacobian periods. And that is his style is obscure and also known for his idiosyncratic vocabulary. Yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not able to see the, I'm sorry, sir, I'm not able to see the top part of it. That is, so Thomas Dekker, 1572 to 1632, he was an English playwright and pamphleter. There is no much biological information available about his upbringing and education and so on. So like most of the dramatists of this period, he too was adopted to the changing, to the changing scenarios, that is switching over to the satires and speaking about city comedy and so on. So his works are comedies and tragic comedies, and most of his works are lost because he did not have a firm connection with any single company, which was done by Shakespeare. So his important work is The Shoemaker's Holiday in the year 1599 and Old Fortunates, written in the year 1599. So that is as we know that this is a city comedy, which which highlights once again on on the vices and the follies of the particular of the 17th century. So the story, the Shoemaker's Holiday, it features three subplots. That is an interclass romance between the citizens of London and aristocrat, and the ascension of the shoemaker, that is and then the romance between a gentleman and the shoemaker's wife. So it presents the social, the cultural, and the economic changes in the early modern England, which was modern England through these writings. And his successful play is The Honest War, written in the 1605 to 1604 to 1605, and this is also considered as an early Jacobian city comedy. So it has got two parts. Part one collaborated between Dekker and Thomas Middleton, and part two is a work of Dekker alone. So so this also, as the other writers have done it, portrays the life in the life in the city of London. And next is yeah. Next is John Marston. John Marston is also a playwright and a poet who was born in Oxford, England. And his works is energetic, and the style is obscure, with rich vocabulary and so on. Now, his popular works are Antonio and Melinda, which deals with the comic crosses of true love. So the plot is conventional in tone, and Marston, he speaks of the emotions, undercurrents the emotion of the story of separated lovers by introducing extreme farce and burlesque in it. And next is a Malcontent, a satirical comedy which is centered on the supplanted duke, who returns to his dukedom in disguise. So this is also that is about an unstable city, a city with the corruptions, treachery, and a plot. And next is The Dutch Courtesan. The play tells the story of two friends, the relaxed, pleasure-loving free will, and the repressed Puritan Malherix. So this also explores the nature of the human desires, the problems which is involved, especially about the moral life and so on. So the play was performed. His plays were performed by the children of the Queen's revels, and one of the troops of boy actors active in the era in the Blackfriars Theatre. It was later taken over by the King's Men, the adult company for which William Shakespeare worked and performed at the Globe Theatre. So this is how the performances also went. And next we have Thomas Middleton, from 1580 to 1627. He's also an English playwright. Thomas Middleton was born in London, studied at Queen's College, Oxford, and Gray's Inn. Now, his comedies also deals with the London life and the traditions of Dekker and Haywood, and his earliest surviving independent play is Blood Master Constable, 1602, and frequently commissioned to write pageants and civic entertainments. And his famous comedies of Intrigue, A Trick to Catch the Old One, A Mad World, My Masters, A Chaste Maid in Cheapside. He also collaborated with he also collaborated with with William Raleigh in 1622, and wrote the most famous tragedy that is called as The Changeling. So before that, we have another important satirical play called as A Game of Chess, once again performed at the Globe Theatre, dramatizing a conflict between Spain and England. So A Game of Chess, it satirizes the historical events, figures of the early 17th century. So it is that is it depicts about the depicted includes members of the English court, the Spanish court, and prominent religious figures. So instead of personal names, the characters are White Knight, Black King, and so on. And his famous tragedies are Women Beware Women, tragedies written in the year 1621, and The Changeling, written in the year 1622. 1622. So these are the two important tragedies of the writer. And then next we have John Webster. So we know that John Webster, a very important playwright, where we get reminded of the Duchess of Malfi, written in the year 1630, which are revenge tragedies. So he's also a playwright in the theatre company of Philip Henslow, and first individually written play was The Devil's Low Case. So this the play that is it centers around the struggle between the anarchy individual and the oppressive rules of the society, and it revolves around the themes of love and death, politics, religion, adopting disguises, corrupt political systems affecting the whole social structure, and the law, which leads to the disintegration of all social bounds. So this is about John Webster and his important work. We will see in the next slide, The Duchess of Malfi. So I think most of us will know about it. The Duchess of Malfi, it is a play which is set in the court of Malfi, Italy, from 1504 to 1510. That is, we have a widowed duchess who falls in love with Antonio, who was a lowly steward, and his brothers, especially Ferdinand and Cardinal, were not happy because they don't want to lose the privileges and so on. So they want to avoid any associations of her also, and so they appoint Boslow to spy on that is on the Duchess, but whatever it is, however, she elopes with Antonio, and she bears 3 children. And finally, what happens is that all the characters, the brothers, Boslow, the Duchess, everybody ends up in a tragic death. Everybody ends up in a tragic death. So this is a revenge tragedy. And next important writers are Beaumont and Fletcher. So Beaumont and Fletcher, their collaboration started in the year 1607 and worked together on more than 50 plays. The first Beaumont and Fletcher folio of 1647 contained 35 plays, and 53 plays were included in the second part of a second folio in 1679. And his tragic comedy Philaster in 1610 and A King and No King in 1611 had a great impact on the early 17th century drama. The comedies, particularly those written with Messenger, had an influence on the progress of the Restoration theatre. So they appear to have replaced Shakespeare around 1609 as chief dramatist of A King's Men. So this is about Beaumont and Fletcher. And the techniques of the Jacobian drama. So what we find is the poor characterization. Okay, so the Jacobian drama satirizing the contemporary behaviors and representing the vices were not that successful because the act of creation and the interpretations was much less. So we find poor characterization, lack of artistic power in the art of characterization, because the dramatist repeated the characters and the character traits also, like a gambling, cheating, killing, that is murder, etc., and so on. So so when we saw all these writers, almost all the plays sounded the same. And lack of drama. Next is lack of dramatic technique. So dramatists could not maintain the mighty line of Marlowe, and their blank verse became weak also. That is mighty lines. We don't find anything which is so important for us to quote on it. And the plot construction, carelessness in plot construction, and lack of coherence. It is unlike Ben Jonson. For example, exceptionalists are there, like Ben Jonson's work, Walpony, The Alchemist, and The White Devil of a Webster stands unique, considering the plot construction and the dramatic techniques and its characterizations. So, moreover, Puritan opposition led to the decline of drama, and regarded drama and drama and all forms of entertainment and as a sin. And there comes an end there comes a decay or decline to drama at this period, and once again it is restored in the year 1660. And then in conclusion, British drama was in a state of decadence. The playwrights of decadence wrote and delivered dialogues in the same language and continued with a set of moral feelings and thinking in common. In 1642, the theatres were closed during the calamitous times of the Civil War. Moreover, with the closing of the theatres, the glorious traditions of the Elizabethan drama, which continued to the Jacobian era, came to an end. So this is regarding the drama. And next is the Jacobian and the Caroline, prose. So Jacobian and the Caroline prose, as we know that it was rich in prose, rich in narratives because of the use of philosophical speculations and scientific knowledge, and the style was highly ornamented, complex, and intricate. And the 17th century, the 17th century prose writing was not only literature based, but also developments was seen in the sermon writings, pamphlets, histories, philosophies, and so on. Now, speaking more about the prose of the Jacobian and the Caroline, the 17th century witnesses the origin and the development of a character writing. So the character writers were influenced by Theophrastus, Seneca, and other dramatists, and they were also indebted to Bacon, who provided them with a pattern style. And this was adopted by Bacon, Burton, Milton, Sir Thomas Browne, Jeremy Taylor, and Clarendon. And most importantly, the Bible, which becomes a supreme example of earlier English prose style, which was simple, plain, and natural. So the prose, it tried to retain the manner of the Elizabethan. It tried to retain the manner of the Elizabethan time, but gradually there was a growth, an excellent growth, especially in the thinking, especially in thinking, and they also worked on varied subjects, unlike the drama of this period. So for the first time, the great scholars, they began to write in English rather than in Latin. So that is how the Bible becomes the best example for its prose style. And so, as I mentioned over here about the character writing, so what we have to understand here is that the Jacobian and the Caroline, and Caroline prose depends upon two styles, adapted to two styles of writing. One is the delineation of a character, or the character style, character writing, and second one is Bacon's prose style. So these are the two important fields where the prose writers depended on. So what is the character? So the character is a name of a literary genre, in short, usually witty sketch in prose of a distinctive type of person. So the genre was inaugurated by Theophrastus, who wrote a book entitled Characters. The literary form had a great vogue in the early 17th century, and characters are the persons represented in a dramatic or narrative work who are interrupted by the reader based on moral, intellectual, and emotional qualities. So, so it is based on it is based on character writing. That is, they gave importance to characters. Okay, they gave importance to the characters, and many characters were also involved in their writings. And secondly, Bacon's adopted Bacon's prose style. That is the character writers of that is as they that is they depended on that is on Bacon's style. For example, his ideas and his observations. For example, Bacon's style is his writings mainly dealt with his observations from the real life and not from the received truths. And secondly, aphorism. So this is, as we know, that it is a short sentence expressing a truth in a fewest possible words. For example, if brevity is the soul of a wit, which is taken from Shakespeare's Hamlet. So this is the kind of the prose that is a prose style that the writers have taken up also. So Bacon's writing is direct and to the point. The style is systematic, moving logically from point to point, and he uses aphoristic style. For example, from off truth, Bacon writes in direct terms, a mixture of a lie doth even add a pleasure. So this is taken from off truth, where he where Bacon speaks about his love for truth, and the meaning of it is a fondness, that is a fondness for the lie, not because it is a lie, but because it covers some of the unpleasant features of the truth. So that is the meaning of it, and it is said in a very short sentence. And next one is from In Off Studies. That is another important that is an important quote. Crafty men condemn studies, simple men admire them, and wise men use them. So this is taken from Off Studies, where Bacon speaks about the importance of reading. So the meaning is crafty men condemn studies. That is, people who are cunning and deceitful doesn't have much appreciation for studies, and they try to accomplish it through crooked ways. And simple men admire them, in the sense that people take lots of pain in order to lots of pain and hardship and diligence in order to learn. And wise men, and the wise men use them. So that is inherently the wise men, they draw their ideas from what they have studied and makes use of it in order to solve a myriad problems. So this is Bacon's prose style, who used aphoristic style, which is compact, condensed, and epigrammatic in style also. And Bacon's writing is direct and to the point. So this is the style that was taken by the prose writers of the Jacobian and the Caroline age. So we have Francis Bacon. So Francis Bacon was the greatest prose writer of the late 16th century and also early 17th century. He was an English philosopher, statesman, scientist, lawyer, jurist, author, and pioneer of the scientific method. He served both as an Attorney General and Lord Chancellor of England. Francis Bacon is not only father of English essay, but he is also the father of modern English prose. Bacon paved the way for modern style in writing of the English prose, and he is known for two things. One is Bacon has been called as the father of empiricism, and he is also known for his aphoristic And he was also known for his aphoristic style. So this is he's been one of the leading figures of the natural philosophies, especially in the field of scientific methodology, and he belongs and he helped the period of a transition from the Renaissance to the early modern period. And and he's also the father of empiricism, is a theory that states that knowledge comes from the sensory experience, in the sense that the informations which is received by means of the senses, particularly from observations, from observations of behaviors, or from especially experimentation, because he believes in experimentation and observation rather than rather than received informations. And Bacon discovered this, and he popularized this style of writing also. And next is and then we also saw about aphoristic style before. And his important work is Advancement of Learning, and the full title of it is of the Proficiency and the Advancement of Learning, Divine and Human, in the year 1605. Now this consists of two books. In the first book, Bacon points out the discredits of learning from human defects of the learned and emptiness of many of the studies chosen, and the second book provides a survey and classification of all kinds of knowledge. So so in the first book, he provides a proof for the dignity of learning. Dignity of learning. So before Bacon, when we take largely, how did they learn was that they memorized it. Am I right? Let it be the classics, especially the Aristotle's, and they even have to follow the diktat also, where there was no escape from them of which was given by the established religion and so on. So it was natural that they have to their learning was memorizing it. So however, Bacon tried to introduce a new system of a learning based on observation and reason. So Bacon also makes a distinction between the theological truth, which is drawn from the oracles and from the scriptures, and the scientific truth, which is from reason. Okay, so theological truth and the scientific truth from reason. And he also charts a map of knowledge. He also charts a map of knowledge. That is, history depends upon the faculty of memory of man, and poetry depends upon the imagination, and philosophy depends upon reason. So this is what that very important work of Bacon, the advancement of learning. And then Bacon is considered as an essayist, as we all know that he's known for his as we all know that he's a great essayist. That is, his essays are with a serious spirit and stately manner of Seneca, and he's the first great English essayist who enjoys a glorious reputation and considered as the father of English essays. So his essays introduces a new spirit of composition into English literature, where he has borrowed the form of essay from Montaigne, the French essayist. That is the form of the essay, but not its spirit. He has borrowed only the form of essay, but not its spirit, because these two great essayists presents a very sharp and interesting contrast. Now, his essays is not friendly. That is, his Bacon's essays is not friendly or confidential, or which is a very familiar or intimate and so on. You know, his essays are mostly impersonal. So Montaigne is personal, familiar, and prolific, and Bacon is formal, curt, and impersonal. Montaigne appeals to the heart, and Bacon to the head. So Bacon's essays are capsules of impersonal wisdom. That is the unique style, and he speaks thus about the unique style of aphorism. So they may not give immediate pleasure, but gives a lasting guidance. They are objective and logically constructed. And the unique style: lucidity, clarity, economy, precision, directness, masculinity, and mathematical plainness. So each sentence conveys conveys a deep meaning or a concentrated meaning in the works, that is in the essays of Bacon. The essays of Bacon. And so these are the essays which is published. I've given only a few here: of truth, of death, of unity, religion, of revenge, of adversity, of simulation, dissimulation, of parents and children, of marriage and single life, of marriage and single life. And then we will move to Robert Burton. He's another great essayist, essayist who was a fellow of Oxford University, who is best known for his famous philosophical book, The Anatomy of Melancholy. So what distinguishes this work is the spirit of sober meditation and philosophical contemplation. So though the book is presented as a medical textbook, it is considered as a medical textbook. Burton applies his vast learning to this, especially to the subject of melancholia. So today it is termed as a clinical depression. So although the text is presented as a medical text, but still it is a great work of literature because he has infused with the scientific or with the scientific understanding and philosophical gatherings in it. So he says that I write of melancholy by being busy in order to avoid melancholy. So melancholy becomes the central theme, and he tries to review all the follies of man, and the spirit of sober meditation and philosophical contemplation is what you find. And book consists of quotations from various ancient and medieval medical authorities. So as we know, what is melancholy? It is sorrow, sickness, trouble, pity, grief, and the opposite of it is pleasure, mirth, joy, happiness, and so on. So is there an escape from this melancholy? So no man is free, and that is, none is happy, or none is so patient, and none is so generous. So Robert Burton tries to say that melancholy, in the sense, is a character of mortality. So there is no escape for man from melancholy. And then the next important the next important prose writer of this period is John Milton. So as we all know, that he was, he wrote at a time when religion and politics, when there was much instability faced in religion as well as in politics. And this great poet was born in the year 1608, and his intellectualism served as a civil servant for the Commonwealth of England under its Council of the State, and later also under Oliver Cromwell. And he wrote during the middle periods of his life from 1640 to 1660, and his prose works either deal with the personal life or public life. Prose consists of 25 pamphlets, and most important work is Areopagitica, which is written in 1644. So it is an impersonal philosophical defense on the principles of the right to freedom of the speech and expression. So this is what you find in Areopagitica. So now this was published at the time of English Civil War, and though Milton was not a member of the Parliament, that is, he did not mean that there's a work has to come to the assembly for an oral speech and so on, but still still he wants to argue on it because of the censorship of publications against certain publications and so on. So the central theme is philosophical opposition to censorship. And the next important person is Jeremy Taylor. Jeremy Taylor was a cleric in the Church of England who attained reputation as an author during the proctorate of Oliver Cromwell. He is known as the Shakespeare of divinities and remembered for his collection of sermons like The Liberty of Prophesying, Holy Living, and Holy Dying. And he's known as a religious prose writer. Uh, so, uh, so yeah, Thomas Jeremy Taylor, that is he's known as the Shakespeare of divinities because of his poetic style of expression. And next we have Thomas Brown. I'm sorry, I just left Thomas Brown. So Thomas Brown was born in the year 1608. He's also an English polymath. That is an individual whose knowledge is splendid, in almost all the subjects and the complex understandings of that is of many issues and many issues and on many subjects. And he is known for Religio Medici, written in the year 1635, curious mixture of religious faith and scientific skepticism. His style is personal and intimidate, idiosyncratic diction, learned, allusions ornate and strongly Latinized. So here the themes, it is religion, and his Religio Medici is structured on the Christian virtues of faith, hope, and charity, where it speaks about the existence of a hell, the last judgment, the resurrection, and the resurrection, and about Christianity as such. So and also he uses scientific imageries in order to illustrate the religious truths. And we saw about Jeremy. And next, the most important prose of this period is the authorized version of the Bible. So this is a work by 47 scholars were appointed in order to work on this religious book. And these scholars were nominated by King James I. It is the first classic in English prose. Its style is considered as a perfection of English language. So the translators of this Bible were also scholars of the Hebrew Bible, because they were able to find appropriate phrases and dictions in their own language. The Bible is considered as the first force which perpetuated in English as well as in English prose also. So of course, this can also come in literature because it has got the elements of poetry, quaintness, mysticism, and imaginations. It is known for the majesty of a style and so on. So this book is also a driving force in shaping the English speaking world. So that is about the authorized version of the Bible. And we know that the literary influence is twofold: rhetoric influence of the Old Testament and the controversial conversational elements that is seen in the New Testament. So the characteristics of a prose writing. So we saw all the important writers of a prose, and now we are going to look into the characteristics of prose writing. So the most popular exercise of the essayist is the delineation of character. We saw that, and the art of character writing, which remains popular during the great part of the century. The pamphleteers of the period have done a valuable service to the cause of English prose. Use of a wealth of imagery, a host of similes and metaphors based on the common everyday objects of nature are obvious in the language of this version. So in conclusion, the Jacobian and Caroline age is considered as a great period, or the development of prose writing is much evidenced in the Jacobian and Caroline age. And the prose writing of this period is a highly ornamented, complex, and intricate. It is a highly pithy and epigrammatic. The early 17th century essays show a clear understanding of the principles of prose and the development of English prose. The contribution to the development of English prose of the character writers, the pamphleters, and the Bible have a great success. So now, having that is a wider understanding of the prose, let us move on to the poetry of the 17th century. So the poetry of the 17th century. So in England, the 17th century is a period of, as we know, that it is a period of great upheavals in almost in all spheres of life, especially in social, political, religious, philosophical, and scientific. But at the same time, there are developments at the same time, there are developments in the writing of the poetry, that is especially innovative ideas of writing, themes of innovations in content was seen, as well as the new techniques that have been adopted. So the main current of the poetry here is metaphysics. So the poets of the 17th century is divided into three main groups: the Spenserian poets, the Cavalier poets, and the metaphysical poets. So and so, moreover, changes in politics and philosophy, even the changes in politics, philosophy, science, they also even these changes have greatly influenced the poetry of the time. And more importantly, it is the metaphysical poetry which was at the zenith during this time, especially challenging the old ideas or the old forms. So let us see. And now the Spenserian poets. After that, we will go. We will see in detail about the Cavalier poets and then the metaphysical poets. And now the Spenserian poets. So even after the Elizabethan age, Edmund Spenser continued to cast his influence on some of the poets, and some of the most important poets who styled themselves after the school of Spenser, that is of the school of Spenser, where I have given here Phineas Fletcher, Giles Fletcher, George Wither, and William Brown. So the works of these poets imitate the style and the themes of Spenserian poetry. Is called as poet's poet, who is known purely for the artistry and for his craft. So the main qualities of a Spenserian poetry is perfect melody, and that is the sense of beauty, splendid imaginations with the heroes, knights, ladies, dwarfs, demons, classical mythologies, and stories about love and chivalry. So now, though the period is dominated by the metaphysical, but still there were some poets during this period who followed the Spenserian style. So the Spenserian poetry, as we know, that it is allegorical, pastoral, as well as a pictorial also. It is allegorical, pastoral, as well as pictorial. So coming to Phineas Fletcher, 1582 to 1650, is a clergy by profession, known for his allegorical poem, The Purple Island, written in the year 1633. The Purple Island is also pastoral in character and has affinity with Spenser's Shepherd's Calendar, written in 12 cantos, and the poem describes the corporal and intellectual function of a man. So it is the main component is the allegory, as we saw, allegorical description. So we know that that is the allegory. Then it's a narrative which is in the guise of something that is suggestively similar, and it also has got a moral bearings. So in pastoral, if we consider in pastoral, what we see is that is the enchanting world of peace and harmony, and the tale of a chivalries and love. And in pastoral, that is allegory, we find that the shepherds act as an agent. Shepherds act as an agent, but in this poem, The Purple Island, the fisherman becomes the agent who speaks about love and religion. And the pictorial description, if we consider, if you take the Spenserian style, the pictorial description we find it will be about the beauty of mountains, meadows, books, that is, and dales, and so on. And here the pictorial representation in the work of Phineas Fletcher or the Spenserian poets is that here especially he speaks about the anatomy of a human being, speaking about the vices and the virtues and the vices, as how man as how man that is in his lifetime has to battle with the virtues and vices. And speaking about Phyllis Wheatley, we will move to Giles Fletcher in the year 1585 to 1623. So he too was a clergyman and the brother of the poet Phineas Fletcher. His well-known poem is Christ's Victory and Triumph in Heaven and Earth Over and After Death, written in the year 1610, relates to the fall, the incarnation, the redemption, and ascension. Giles excels among the Spenserian school of poets. Sorry, that's a mistake. And even aims for higher majesties of melody and imagination than Spenser attempted. So this is about Giles Fletcher. And then we have got the next the poet George Wither. Now, unlike Fletcher brothers, Wither is a Puritan, and his important work is titled as Juvenilia. It is again a collection of love and pastoral poems, which encompasses the pictorial, the allegory in their writings. And his notable poems are The Shepherd's Hunting in the 1615, Fidelia and Fairy Virtue in the year 1624. And his later works was religious in tone after his conversion to Puritanism. His Hymn and Songs of the Church, written in the year 1623, brings a more sober vein. And after George Wither, we have got William, that is William Brown. William Brown, also known for his important work, Britannia's Pastoral and the Shepherd's Pipe. Now, Britannia's Pastoral, that is recalls Sydney's Arcadia, which is written in heroic couplet and contains vivid description of nature. And and then we will move on to the Cavalier poets. Now we saw the Spenserian poets. Now the Spenserian poets are also called as the transition poets because who belonged to the early 16th century and coming to the 17th century, they were not able to give up the style that is of the style of the writings of Spenser. And next we have the Cavalier poets. So Cavalier poets were also a group of English gentlemen poets who gathered at the court of Charles I. Because of their loyalty and support for Charles I, these poets were called as Cavaliers. Now, the Cavalier poets tried to seek to fashion their poetry after Ben Jonson, as I told you before. And sometimes even like Donne, they present the feelings in terms of images. And Geoffrey Walton calls this poetry as aristocratic synthesis of Ben Jonson or Ben Jonson and Donne. So, so as I have given you an explanation that is of Johnson, who's called as Ben of Sons of a Ben, as how the Cavaliers poets followed his style, but at the same time they also they also followed the image of John Donne also. So because what was the speciality of John was that because he did not take the images from the classical mythologies like the earlier Elizabethans have done it, but rather he concentrated on the knowledge, the contemporary knowledge, especially on the theology, philosophy, and natural science and natural sciences. And natural sciences. Excuse me. So that's the two veins of Ben Jonson and Donne is mingled in the poetries of the Cavalier, in the poetries of a Cavalier. Okay, and who are the Cavalier poets is Robert Herrick, Thomas Carew, Sir John Suckling, and Richard Lovelace. And now we will see about the common features in the poetry of Cavalier. So the Cavalier poets use direct and colloquial language, expressive of a highly individual personality. Cavalier poets reflect the lighter side of life and literature in the 17th century, hopeful, passionate, and amorous kind of poetry. And important themes in their poetry include the theme of honor, theme of carpe diem or seize the day, love, cynicism, and pagan sensibility. Cavalier poets were writers of a witty and polished lyrics of a courtship and gallantry. So this is these are the common features of the poetry of Cavalier. These are the common features that we find in the poetry of Cavalier poets. And then we have got Robert Herrick from 1591 to 1674. Now, Herrick's poetry falls into three groups: anatomy poems, religious poems, and epigrams. And that is his best-known work is Hesperides, and we have got the work like Both Human and Divine of Robert Herrick. And a group of religious poems comes under the title Noble Numbers. And his themes, as we see, were spiritual, philosophical in nature, Christian faith, brevity of life, and particularly life's youth and beauty. The style was directness of speech with clear and simple presentation of thought. And then we have Thomas Carew, is known for workmanship. His erotic poem is A Rapture, which is considered as the best and the longest of his poems. And the subject matter and the subjects are varied. Number of poems treating love, lovemaking, and feminine beauty. And then we have the next poet, Sir John Suckling. Now, like Thomas Carew, Suckling is a court poet. A collection of Suckling's poems first appeared in 1646 as Fragment Aurea. Now, in the poem Sonnet, the poet is lovesick. His mind is so reverted on love that he does not care a hinge for any other consideration. So make me but mad enough, give me good store of love. And in the poem My Dearest also shows his argumentative development of his emotional experience. And then we have got Richard Lovelace. He's also a poet of a finer sensibility in the sense and his important work is the Scrutiny. And another important poem was To Lucasta. And the theme of his poems is the importance of honor and duty. The speaker asks his beloved not to think harshly of him for leaving her side to go to war. So what happens to Lucasta is that she waits for him, but then he doesn't turn up, and then she gets married to another person as he was going to the war. So so this the feelings and the emotions has been shown in the poem To Lucasta. And then we have the most important poet, John Milton. So John Milton, the prominent writer in the Puritan age, who combines the spirit of Renaissance and Reformation with the musical versification, and we find the spirit of a freedom and morality in his poetry. So he's a 17th century writer who was a celebrated scholar and a distinguished English and Latin poet. He's also called as a palimpsest. The great English poet was born in London in the year 1608, and he was much interested in Latin, Greek, and Italian culture. To Milton, poetry was not a mere intellectual exercise or diversion, but considered it as a solemn, sacred, and a sublime. And John Milton is considered as the last great poet of English Renaissance. So he was a great scholar of Hebrew language also. So as I told you, is the last great poet of English Renaissance who laid down in his work the foundation for emerging aesthetic of founding of the aesthetic of a post-Renaissance period. He laid the foundation, who brought that is a diverse change in writings. So as we know that he's best, he is known for his epic poem Paradise Lost. So, so to say something about him, although his academic talents marked him for a career in the Anglican Church, Milton turned away from the Church of England at a very early age, and and was constantly supporting the Puritans. And he spent most of his time in academics, serving as a civil servant, working for the Puritan Commonwealth. So he began to write under the Renaissance influence, and later the Puritan strain and the Puritan ideas or the ideologies started to enter into his writings. And next we see that how his poems are divided. So Milton's early poetry belongs to the period 1623 to 38. When he was at Cambridge and later at Horton, he produced the poems which has got the Renaissance style in it. And before 1640 and 1660, mainly a prose writer supporting political cause. And most fruitful part of Milton's career as a poet is the period after 1660, producing his great epics. So here we'll be concentrating on the four important poems written under the Renaissance influence. So they are considered as mature poems, and they show the influence of Puritanism, which was getting mixed up with the poets' Renaissance culture also. So we find the mixture of both. The Puritan influence is also there, but at the same time, the Renaissance culture is also there. So taking into consideration L'Allegro and Il Penseroso, both are pastoral poems, which speaks about gladness of man and melancholy of and the melancholy of man. So this poem, it connects the main characters with the folk stories and fairy tales, in addition to comic plays and performances. Now there is a progression from the pleasures that is found in L'Allegro, or that is the pleasures that is found of a man, that is with the comic plays, with the folk stories, with the fairy tales, and so on. And when we take Il Penseroso, it is the pleasure that he finds within oneself, within oneself. So so that is how this it concentrates on the melancholy of man. So so in order to express these feelings, he invokes the muses. And his great most important work, Paradise Lost, in 12 books, and Paradise Regained in 4 books together, make Milton the greatest epic poet in English. And Paradise Lost, written as an exposition of Milton's theology, it undertakes to justify the ways of God to man. So in that is in Paradise Lost, we know that how Milton sets forth the revolt of Satan against God, the wars in heaven, the angels, the creations of the world and man, the temptation of Adam and Eve, the fall, their fall, and the expulsion of Adam and Eve from the Garden of Eden. So ultimately, fate of man becomes the subject matter here, and Milton loves what that is called as freedom, freedom of thinking, freedom of writing, and he always tries to concentrate on the sense of justice and that is, and the hatred of tyranny also. Speaking about his works, let us go to the characteristics of Milton's poetry. So all Milton's writings have a religious and a moral significance. It has got a religious and a moral significance. Because as an epic poet, as an epic poet, we find the qualities of sublime and seriousness in it. And Matthew Arnold calls Milton's style as grand style, And he uses similes, epic similes as usage of epic similes is another feature that enhances his grand style. Also used classical allusions, digressions, Latinism, repetition, and several figures of speech. So we know about the usage that is Milton's grand style. That is numerous references are made, and allusions, complex vocabularies, complicated grammatical constructions, and the use of similes and metaphors. And of course, that is grand style, also seen the rhetorical style, which is that is a rhetorical style, which is highly ornamented with with the metaphors and similes, and use of personifications. Now, all these invokes what that is called as emotions also in his plays, and Milton's style is called as, according to Ralph, packs his meaning in the fewest possible words and in the most musical language. Milton is best entitled to the name of classic. Tennyson called Milton as a God-gifted organ voice of England. So understanding about that is the Cavalier poets, and and about John Milton, we are moving to the metaphysical, the third phase of poetry, the metaphysical school of poetry. So so the metaphysical school of poetry, it is a term. Metaphysical or metaphysics in poetry is the fruit of Renaissance. And John Dryden said in his discourse concerning satire that John Donne in his poetry affects the metaphysics. And later in 1779, Samuel Johnson extended the term metaphysical from Donne to a school of poets, which is incorporated in the life of Colley. Now, so the name is later applied to a group of 17th century poets who, whether or not directly influenced by Donne, employ similar poetic procedures and imagery, both in secular poetry written by Cleveland, Marvell, and Colley, and in religious poetry of Vaughan, Croshaw, and Trahan. Let us see that is how affects the metaphysics. Okay, so literally, yeah. Literally, meta means above, am I right? Means beyond or above, and the is the physical nature or the materialistic or the natural or the normal world. So, so what we understand is that from normal to above is called as metaphysical. For example, the study of ghost or spirituality, the spirit, this is considered as metaphysical. So there is that is, but when we but there is a pause even for there is a pause even for logical thinking, am I right? Especially science, but there is a something beyond, that is from the finite to infinite. Now, there is another interpretation for it. Now, in this age, there is a tremendous growth of science and technology. Okay, so there is a tremendous growth of a science and technology, that is, which nobody can deny it. Am I right? So the writers from beginning has not liked the science or the logic, but they liked to speak the instance. Okay, the instance. So during this time, when that is when the science was developing, it was hard for the people to accept it, and still the science was in the air for writers. So though they opposed technology, they were influenced by science, not directly but indirectly. So the acceptance must be there, but readily it was not accepted. It was taking some time. Now, that is in science and technology. Now, that is image. No, we cannot take, for example, how the image they have taken, for example, two handles of bicycle as two lovers, and we compare to it. To overcome this and others is an indirect way of using imagery from science, using imagery from science. So and so the image comes from science and technology, and many critics did not agree, and both Dryden and Dr. Johnson disagreed to the mixture of poetic imagery and scientific imagery. That is why Dryden said that Donne affects metaphysics. Later, Colley, that is in the life of Colley, Dr. Johnson said that in metaphysical conceits, okay, he called it as heterogeneous ideas yoked by violence, because as I told, they were not able to accept the development of science and technology, but indirectly they started to accept it, and and they tried to compare it, they tried to take that as image and started to apply it. So it is that is why that is that is why they call it as a heterogeneous ideas yoked by violence, that is dissimilar ideas. For example, two compass and yoked together by violence. So what is violence over here? Is that is being done by force. So that is taking images from science and technology is done by violence, or is done by force, yoked by violence. Okay, so it's just called as yoked by violence. And so this is what metaphysical poetry is, characterized by subtle, complex, and concentrated thoughts, and exploited all knowledge. Okay, so exploited all knowledge from the commonplace, from esoteric, practical theology, philosophy, and witty. So every that is every from everything that is every that is from every resources, they started to take the knowledge, and they used it as an image. Okay, so the common features of metaphysical poetry. Now, it employs bold and ingenious conceits called metaphysical conceits. So Dr. Johnson called it as combination of dissimilar objects. Okay, so conceit here originally means a concept or image, a figure of a speech which establishes a striking parallel, usually ingeniously elaborate, between two dissimilar things or situations. So it can be the image can be from any field of knowledge. It also can be from history or geography, from astronomy, or from mathematics. So what happened to the metaphysical conceit once again was that it was not approved by the contemporaries, but that is, or in the latter age also. So Dryden said Donne affects metaphysics, saying that Donne has become almost mad. So considered as a contemporary, considered as a contemporary, though it was it was used, but who that's this that is that is the metaphysical conceit or the metaphysics becomes very interesting during this 20th century, which was taken by T.S. Eliot, who makes it a habitual to write. Now, why T.S. Eliot gets interested is what is a similar to Donne, that is, and Eliot. What was a similar for Donne to Donne and Eliot is that is, they liked the technology. The similarity in technology was there. So when Donne wrote, it was vague, but that is the science and technology was just upcoming. But during the 20th century, that is during the Eliot's period, technology was widely accepted. So what happened was that Eliot took interest in metaphysical conceit, and he obviously used this manner in his writings, especially the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock. So finally, this metaphysical conceit was received by Eliot later. So this is just an an added information that I give you here. And the metaphysical school the metaphysical school of poetry, John Donne, George Herbert, Thomas Carew, Henry Vaughan, and Richard Croshaw. And we have John Donne. The founder of Metaphysical School of Poetry, is a great scholar and theologian. And his famous works is a Pseudo-Martyr, The Progress of the Soul, and An Anatomy of the World, and Elegy, epithalamion, satires, songs and sonnets, and elegies, which were published posthumously about 1633. And John Donne's amorous poetry. So we find his love poetry, which is brilliantly woven, and his songs and sonnets, once again, is a collection of love poems, intense and subtle analysis of all the moods of a lover. And some of his other works are Air and Angels, a nocturnal upon S. Lucy's Day, a valediction for forbidding mourning, and Donne essentially a psychological poet whose primary concern is a feeling, and his poems are intensely personal. And he has also written religious poetry as well as satirical poems. So religious poems like a holy sonnets and a hymn to God the Father. That is where we find that it is a devotional poems and so on. And on the other side, satirical poems like Progress of the Soul. It reveals the cynical nature and keen critical mind, showing the dissatisfaction with the world around him. And most importantly comes Donne's imagery. So just now we discussed about the metaphysical conceit and so on. So here we will see that is three examples here from the poetry, from the poem The Flea. It presents the image of a flea that has just bitten both the speaker and his beloved. Of course, it is an erotic image, the flea, but it is considered as a metaphor for sex here. And next is a valediction forbidding mourning. Donne compares the two lovers to a compass. How he compares is that the souls of the separated lovers are compared to the feet of the compass. So his lover's soul is the fixed foot to the center, and his is the foot that moves around also. And in canonization, again, Donne compares the lovers to the moth, which is drawn to a candle. Then to the candle itself they burn, and they burn out, and it gives a light. So these that is images. It's just from a simple, just from common, that is from our surroundings, from the common surroundings, and so on. But still, that is. But still, he tries to combine the dissimilar images of everyday and commonplace experiences also. And the other writers are George Herbert. His poems like The Temple is a religious interest that he shows, and his style is a clarity of expressions and concrete imagery, intelligible conceits. And then we have Richard Croshaw, known for his work, The Steps to the Temple, which is religious and secular, known for conceits, religious fire and fervor. Then we have Henry Vaughan, also known for his work, which is called as poems, again known for his intellectual power and originality. And Thomas Carew, that is his collection is called as poems, lyrical, spontaneity, and religious in nature. So now we have come to the conclusion of the 17th century. So the 17th century was an age of great progress and expansion. The political establishments, political thinking, social relations, all these had a great influence on the life of man. But at the same a time we also find the scientists, the scholars, and the travelers. They had a that had widened man's intellectual horizon. Literary men, artists, and musicians opened new landscapes for expression and new ideals for civilized life. Okay, so a great progression and expansion is experienced and felt, and of course, the contemporary society, the contemporary writers has accepted the conditions and tried to reformulate themselves and formulate themselves in the case of let it be let it be regarding politics or religion, or or personal perceptions and so on, and the acceptance of the age as itself was also felt. Thus, the end of 17th century saw the foreshadowing of a new classical style, which enlightened during the 18th century. So the end of the 17th century comes to an end, and then we are moving to the enlightened period, that is the 18th century, with a new classical style in it. And then the references that has been made are on these three books, and the Routledge, A History of English Literature, and a compendium of the History of English Literature by Trivedi. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for a mammoth presentation. Nothing one can ask more in this particular topic than the kind of information and presentation, and what a beautiful PPT you have made. Congratulations for that also.
Thank you, sir.
As I was saying, that if one wants to explore this age and understand the age and understand the various nuances of the age, nothing can be better than today's presentation. So we, on behalf of Team DAATH VOYAGE, wholeheartedly thank you for such a detailed, descriptive, lucid presentation, and we are really thankful for that. It requires a lot of tenacity, hard work. For the information of the participants, I don't know whether you all have seen or not, ma'am has 80 PPTs. It's unimaginable. It speaks volume of the kind of effort that you are willing to put in a lecture, and I really feel blessed. I really feel blessed to have you today, and I really envy the students of your college, the kind of nectar that they might be extracting from teachers like you, from teachers like Dr. Manju. And I think the students of Nirmala College are blessed, the English department, to have such good teachers. Thank you very much. On Department of Team DAATH VOYAGE, there are few questions. You please take some rest, have a glass of water, and then we ask the questions.
Yes, sir.
Many participants have thoroughly enjoyed your presentation. Thank you very much. It was really an awestruck presentation. Nothing more can one ask for. So yes, participants, today again with the end of this lecture, it has been proven that we are in for a very, very enriching lecture series, and time again, the words of mine, which I always tell every day in the beginning, that we were really happy that we were able to accumulate or gather those galaxy of teachers whom we wanted in this particular series. So please try not to miss even one session of this series, which I'm sure you will not. So thank you very much. Please put forward your questions. I would just like to address to our session basically is a heterogeneous group ranging from graduation to associate and professors as well. So we have some very interesting questions and fresh questions. We have one more interesting question here, that how the travelers expanded the men's intellectual horizon, as most are plunderers and slaughtered the natives. Like, for example, you have Columbus. So why do you think the travelers expanded the men's intellectual horizon? Ma'am, you need to unmute. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So any age, any contemporary age for that, we can say that there is follies and there is vices, there is virtues, and there are and other words, vices also. So that is, though we speak about the upheavals or about the problems like this, but still we have got good people also in the society which cannot be taken. So though this period, the Jacobian period, had got lots of religious problems, political problems, etc., they were able to reformulate themselves and take it up. So it is not only that we have got all the people or all the society is slaughters and killers and so on, but still we have got good people also with us. The scholars are there, the intellectuals are there, the learned people are there, and so on, who one side tries to progress the country in one way or the other.
Thank you, ma'am. The next question is, as John Bunyan himself is a Puritan, and in Puritanism, there was no permission of having wine. So why then, while writing his Pilgrim's Progress, he mentions a particular area where the Christians sat down at one place to eat bread and to drink the wine from the bottle with his friends, damsels, etc., had given him at his parting from them?
Yeah. So here we have to understand the two religions, that is Catholicism and Puritanism. Now, Catholicism, Roman Catholicism, is known for breaking of the bread, or breaking of the bread, which symbolizes Jesus' body and his blood. So wherever the Catholics go, the practice that the Catholics undertake is breaking of the bread, which is done with a wine and with a piece of a bread. But whereas the Puritan religion, strongly to say, they did not practice such a thing, and they did not believe in the tabernacle. And that is the reason the Bunyan tries to bring the two concepts of Puritanism as well as Roman Catholic ideals into his work. So this is Bunyan's great thought that he has got in order to appreciate another religion along with Puritanism.
Thank you,
Along with Puritanism, yeah.
Now a question which is often asked when we tend to teach the metaphysical poets to our students. The question is, as we all know, T.S. Eliot and Virginia Woolf revived the metaphysical poetry in the 20th century. Why weren't the metaphysical poets celebrated during their time?
As I told you, as I told you when I was taking the class, that is, we will not understand the worth of something when we have something with us. We will not understand the worth of it. So only later we will really understand the worth of it. Or for example, the parents' advice, or the teacher's advice, we will not understand. Even in the beginning of the session, you gave wonderful advice to the children as to how they have to accept it. But then they will be able to understand it only when they become very matured. So when they become mature, when they are at our stage, they will be able to understand it better. Metaphysical was not appreciated at that time because it was just at the beginning of the science and technology, or the advancement of science and technology just began. So the intellectuals like Donne, and his contemporaries, they were able to accept the growth of, or the advancement of science and technology. So they felt that because Donne always had had a feeling that why always go back? Why not my contemporary society? Why not this? Okay, why shouldn't I do it like this? So why not I break the traditions and so on? So that is the reason, though he took it up as a challenge to concentrate his works on metaphysical, though he knows that it's not going to become very popular, but still he concentrated on it and wrote. It is not that he wants to become popular that he has written it, because he felt that he must live his age, he must live the contemporary age. That might be the reason that he wrote it. And that is, they were not popular, and they were not popular at that time. And as I said, only later we understand that is why they have used the metaphysical conceits in their poetry.
And if we see also in the last 300 years, from the time of metaphysics till the time of Virginia Woolf, there was a lot of scientific development, scientific temperament. There was this rise of the middle class and the educated middle class. So I think there was a very drastic change of thought also. So something which was taboo at that time was very
exactly
easily acceptable during this time. A
Yes,
lot
of
of
course.
transformation in thought process have gone in the last 300 years if we
Exactly.
take into consideration the European people.
Yeah. So why not we can speak even today also. Most of us, the parents, especially me as a parent, doesn't want to give the mobile phone to my son or to my daughter, but I'm forced to give it. So I have to accept the fact that, without this present technology, I cannot give education to my children. So this acceptance, and also, though I considered it as a taboo a few years back, today I have to accept it. There is no other go for me. I have to.
It's
so
just
we
like
have to live the age.
The technology which is at your disposal, how well you use it in your favor or in your against. Technology is there. So it's just that how we use it. And but as you said, maturity plays a very significant role, and still there is a lot of question mark on giving these mobiles and tablets to the students. There has been a lot of concern. Now I think government has also fixed the online learning timing also. So there's a lot of concern, and still this is something which we are still anxious about, I guess, and a little apprehensive, which we should. I think we are not wrong, because there's not been a solution. There's not been a solution. Like if you watch Netflix, Netflix has a locking system that general content and adult content. Now adult means many things, violence and everything. So you have an option to lock. So nobody who has the mobile, who knows your mobile access also, the code also, can open and go into Netflix. Netflix will not allow. So something like that, if we have an online thing also. And of course, in the last 1.5 years, if we see Zoom itself as a platform, it has developed so much. It has changed itself. The algorithm has become so better now. Zoom has so better control facilities. I'm sure with the passage of time, even if we see in the last 2 years, our broadband system in our country has improved so well. So if we give some time, definitely positive outputs will come out. It's just that we are at the beginning phase. But credit goes to this Zoom and this internet, that because of Zoom and internet, you teaching from Coimbatore to the entire students of not only India, abroad also, and people are getting, people are having a taste of your teaching pedagogy. This is such a beautiful thing. So I think this is something positive, and something which this pandemic has given us, apart from so much of negativity and so much of suffering. Zoom and this online lectures are really a boon. I feel that. I get so much of enlightenment. Somebody wrote in this chat box, can you just tell me, that person asked you, is a professor. He asked you, can you just tell me how much time did you take to prepare these 80 slides?
I started once when you gave me the opportunity to do it, sir.
So it was
because 17th century is really a dry century. I was just discussing with Dr. Manju also, and I actually want to give her a punch also, in fact. But this was a learning experience for me also. No, we just know that Jacobian Age is, Caroline is there, and this is there. So what are the features of it, the characteristics of it? When I learned it, I really loved the 17th century. So I should thank you, in fact, for giving me an opportunity to explore the 17th century literature.
And I should thank Dr. Manju for the recommendation that I got. And I see that the teachers of Nirmala College, whenever they come on this platform, they never come below 60 slides. So it's really so humbling opportunity, and we feel so humble to have people like you all on our platform. And it's really, we feel so happy that at least I think we are doing something good, that you all are supporting us. And it's something which we feel good. We have, at the end of the day, after 9 o'clock, I have that good feeling that today this lecture went so well, and so many students have benefited from today's lecture. And we got such a good resource person who gave so much of time, because every day we come, this history of English literature, sometime till the time we are alive, it will fascinate us. So so we always look forward for something new, something more informative. And the way you presented, your presentation of PPT was so beautifully done, so constructively and meticulously done, especially for the graduate and the postgraduate students. They will highly benefit from it. And definitely we request you, if you have any e-material, reference material, please share with us. We will share with the students. Apart from us also, we will also be sharing some with the students. So with that, we come to the closure of a very beautiful, enthralling, interactive session of presentation as well as question answer. As already conveyed to you, words are not enough to thank you for your efforts of delivering this magnanimous lecture. And we are thrilled, and we are definitely honored, and we are so happy that the lecture went so well. Thank you very much for your dedication and honor, and looking forward to having you again on this platform, ma'am. Thank you so much. Please
take care. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, sir.
Good night. Good night, participants.
Good night.